Okay guys, these are all of the books that I read this month. Let's just say it was a successful month, so. Oh my god. OMG. That like just physically pained me that just happened. Physically pained me. Guys, and welcome to today's video. My name is Destiny. If you've never seen my face before, it is so nice to have you here, and if you have seen my face before, welcome back. Lovely to have you. Today we are going to talk about the books that I read in December. So if you are new here, this may be your first video you're seeing of me. I just basically talk through all of the books that I read, give them ratings, and just tell you guys my thoughts about them. So I do have a book journal where I keep all of my thoughts. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. This month was my best reading month to date. How many 5 and 4 and 4.5 star books that I read this month were astronomical. I had such an actually enjoyable time reading this month. Like, I loved almost every single book that I read, and you guys know that feeling, like if you have a month or even just one book that you really love, it's just such like this undescribable feeling. And all of the books I read this month, basically, I loved. So I was super happy about that. So obviously, we're not gonna have that many negative reviews. So let's just get right into this. I do wanna start out by saying I did read 11 books this month. The month felt so long. Like, when I go back always in my wrap-ups, I look at the first book that I read of that month. I'm always like, that was in November. And it just really throws me off. Anyway, the first book we're gonna be starting out with is The Love Hypothesis. Let me tell you guys that I had seen so much hype about this book. I'm pretty sure this was the September, one of the, oh, you are not trying to get up here right now. You are not. You are not trying to sit like this right now. I think we have fixed this situation now. Me and Charlie are just gonna sit here and both talk to you, and I've scooted us a little bit closer because I feel like that was just a little weird of a distance. Anyway, the first book of this month was The Love Hypothesis. Pretty sure this was the September book of the month pick for romance, and I saw so many people, and I know you guys are into like Bookstagram, BookTube, Book Talk. You also saw so many people talking about this book, and I just had to get it. I literally was like, I have to read this book. Like, I see so much hype about it. And let me tell you guys, I rated this book a 5 out of 5 stars. This book was absolutely amazing. For this book, I could not come up with something that I didn't like about it. I literally was in my notebook, and when I was doing this, I was like, what did I not like about this book? And I literally started reading this like kind of at night, and I stayed up all night to read this book, all night. Like, I could not put it down. I kept on telling myself, I was like, okay, just finish this chapter and then you're done. You can just finish in the morning. And then I would just be like, I need to read the next chapter. After that, I'm done, so on and so forth. But basically what this book is about, if you have not seen this, it is about Olive as our main character, and she is like getting her PhD, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, she's third year PhD candidate is what it says. And she basically went out with this one guy. It wasn't even like, she didn't date him really. It was kind of like they went out on a date, and her best friend actually had like an actual connection with him and ends up liking him. And she just feels bad because her and Olive are just like the best versions of best friends that they can be. Like, they care so much about each other, and she doesn't want to like hurt Olive because she feels like Olive just isn't telling her that she still likes him. Anyway, Olive is like, you can go date him. I'm dating somebody, but she's not. So her best friend actually catches her like at the lab one night when she's supposed to be out on a date. So she just kisses the nearest person to her, which I know sounds probably so stupid, but that is Adam Carlson, and he's like a professor at the school. He's not her professor, because I don't really like that like dynamic, but it's not her professor. He's just like a different professor at the school, but he's not really a professor. I don't know, it's kind of confusing. And so they decide to like fake date. And the funny thing about this book is that our main character Olive is like aware of all of the tropes, and like she talks about it at one point with him, and it was just like one of the funnier moments of the book. It was super cute. I loved Adam so much. He was like amazing. The little hints that neither one of them get, but you know, if you've read enough romance, that you are picking up that they like each other, and you're just like, just pick it up that you guys like each other. Their convos were like so amazing. I think it's because they're both like educated, and it was cool to actually like have some educated conversations, because most of these romances are just like so generic in their conversations. I was literally like smiling and giggling out loud at this book. Like, this book was absolutely amazing, and it has turned into one of my favorite books, period. Speaking of one of my new favorite books, we have Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. I die for this book. I think it goes hating game. It ends with us. Love in Other Words. This is like one of my favorite books of all time. Obviously, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I was a little nervous to read this book because I was like, so many people hype up this book, but I had wanted to read it for such a long time. And I was like, okay, I'm finally gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. I bought it. I was so happy about it. And I read it. This book, you're basically following Macy and Elliot. So this is like a childhood best friends to lover situation. So you're following them. It's like basically kind of like every summer / break from school, Macy goes to this house that they have, and in the closet when they first like bought the house, she saw Elliot because he lived next door, and so then he always comes over after that, and they're best friends. So anytime she has a break at school or on a weekend or anything, she goes up to this house and her and Elliot read together, which just please, that is my dream. But this, like, the dynamic of them like reading books and recommending books to each other and them talking about books, I was like, I died. I was like, oh my god, this is so freaking adorable. I love it so much. And let me tell you, they do something in this book which is why it's called Love in Other Words. It's not like a huge spoiler. What's your favorite word of the day? Like, they'll be talking and they'll be like, okay, what's your favorite word? Like when a conversation gets a little like stiff, and that was just so freaking adorable, because sometimes they'd be like in the middle of an awkward conversation, or they'd be in the middle of a conversation and one of them would just be like favorite word, and then they would say something kind of like relating to the situation, and it was just like, and also like the innocence and then growing up with somebody and realizing that relationship dynamic is changing was like so cute to me. And I just feel like I like the whole childhood like friends to lovers trope, because there's a connection and there's a bond that's kind of more deeper there. And their backstory, like, I'm telling you, I feel like I loved reading the backstory a little bit more than I liked reading the like now, and the connection between the two was just everything. It was everything. The only thing that I really hated about this book, I don't even know if you can hate it because it wasn't like a huge thing to even make this rating go down, but like our main character, she would just like ignore the most important conversation ever. Like, she would just ignore them, and like it would cause such a big problem. And I don't know how many times I've said this, but I hate when people don't communicate, because like the no communication in romances angers me physically, because I'm like, why don't you guys just, I don't know, talk about it? But anyway, 5 out of 5, one of my favorite books ever. Love it so much. Next, I read The Deal, and this is the first book in the Off-Campus series. I read this because Steph bore, Larry reads, basically everyone raves about this whole entire series, especially this book. Like, I feel like this book is the most loved book of the series. I did rate this a 5 out of 5 stars because I just enjoyed it. Like, I thought it was a fun book to read, and I just thought it was like funny at some moments. It takes place in a college atmosphere. It's basically about Garrett and Hannah. Garrett is like the star of the hockey team, and Hannah's more like does musical theater and stuff like that, and she isn't one of those girls that just falls for Garrett's charm, and he is failing in class while she's like really passing it, and so he asks her to tutor him, and she's like no, and then they strike up a deal, which is why it's called The Deal. Hannah is the girl boss in like the best way, because you know, like sometimes that girl boss can be a little annoying, just saying. Like if they like too much girl boss it, but she was like a girl boss in the best way. She was so confident in herself. And Garrett's character development was amazing. Like, I'm gonna be honest, one of the things that I didn't like at first was like when you're first reading Garrett's point of view, because you get both of their point of views, Garrett was a total douchebag, and I was like, ugh, I don't know if I can root for him if he stays like this. But he doesn't. Hannah kind of teaches him, and when they talk about things in their own life and share experiences with each other, they kind of form this like deeper connection, and they both start changing as people, which is good to see, because if Garrett didn't change, I think I would have rated this book like a 3 or 2, because Lord Jesus, was that not it. Okay, now I should say this is when I decided that I wanted to get through most of Colleen Hoover's books. I'm pretty sure I only have the Slammed series, and then Layla are the only books that I still need to read for Colleen Hoover. So these are the rest of the books that I hadn't read yet from her. So basically the rest of this video, except for one book, is just Colleen Hoover. So let's enjoy it. I read Maybe Someday. This book, you're following Sydney is our main character, and Ridge is our like male love interest. And so Sydney finds her boyfriend cheating on her with her best friend on her birthday, and so she's kind of just thrown into this mess. And Ridge, who they live in like the same apartment complex, and basically she could see him from her balcony every day. They have had these like little kind of like communication a little bit so far, and so he like basically takes her in and lets her live at his apartment because he's a musician, and they just kind of form this connection. And so from there the story just continues on. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars at first. I'm leaning more towards like a 4 or honestly 3.5 stars after I've had time to sit and think about this book, because it just wasn't one of like my absolute favorites. I think I said this in a previous video, like if you like music, then you would like this book, because this wasn't as like hard-hitting as most of Colleen Hoover's books are. All of her books have a plot twist. This one didn't really have a plot twist. Like, I don't know if this book was a little, I don't think this book had a plot twist. It was more of like a lighthearted story. To me, Ridge was just so wholesome. Like, I absolutely loved his character because he just cared about everybody. I just didn't find myself really caring that much about the characters or the story, for the matter of fact. Next, in the last book that is not Colleen Hoover for this month, I read You Deserve Each Other, because I have seen this book around everywhere, and I actually read this on my Libby app and loved it so much that I had to literally go and find a copy of this book because I just needed the physical copy of this book. I loved this book. I think this book is in my top 5, not even joking, which is weird because I did rate this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars because there were just some things in this book that I really couldn't get over. And I wish I could tell you guys the exact things, but it was just so annoying where I was like, I can't give you that 5 out of 5, but you are one of my favorite books. So basically, if you guys have not heard about this book yet, you are following Naomi, who's our main character, and Nicholas, who is her fiance. So obviously they are engaged. They basically have this hard spot in their relationship, and you are kind of following them, and it's not like dark and depressing, like we're in a hard spot. It's more of like a rom-com. So basically Naomi's like, I want out of this relationship. That literally says it on the back. This is the whole premise of the book. She wants out of this relationship, but Nicholas, his family is like super rich, and his mom, well, it's like monster-in-law, like literally one of the worst people I've ever read in a book. And so she is basically like, if she ends the relationship, she's gonna get stuck with the bill for the wedding that his mom has already paid for. So she's like, I don't have the money for that. So they basically are kind of going back and forth, trying to make each other want to break off the relationship. At some parts, I was literally laughing out loud. Like, I was laughing. This book made me actually laugh, and that does not happen for a lot of books, especially romance, like when they try to be funny and it's just kind of like It was so funny and heartwarming, which I feel like is the best combo. I really loved it. And let me tell you, once you start getting to like the root of their relationship, I absolutely adored Naomi and Nicholas. Like, I loved Nicholas, honestly. I thought he was actually like so sweet once you actually get to know his character. But I just felt like this was also kind of really realistic in the sense of like, sometimes when you're in a long-term relationship and sometimes you hit those more like rough patches where you're kind of like, why is this person really annoying me right now? Or like you're just a little bit more irritable, and it may be things going on with your life, things that you guys kind of haven't communicated. And okay guys, I'm editing this video right now, and I realized that I really was not saying that how I was trying to say it. So basically what I was trying to say was that it depicts being in a long-term relationship in a way that there are times that you kind of hit those rough spots, but then when you guys kind of reconnect and find the reasons that you fell in love with each other, it's even more amazing, is what I was trying to say. Now we're back to Colleen Hoover. Hopeless. This was a 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. This is like, okay, let me think of all of Colleen Hoover's books. It Ends With Us. Now I'm looking over there. It Ends With Us. OMG. I think It Ends With Us, Hopeless, November 9th are my top 3 Colleen Hoover's. Did not think I would like this book as much as I did. Absolutely adored it. You're following Sky, who's our main character, and Holder, who is the love interest. So basically Sky is kind of raised in this household where she's not allowed to have technology. Her mom is like strict in that whole like no technology, no TV, no none of that, but she can kind of like, she has friends that she can hang out with and she can have boyfriends and stuff like that. Like it's weird. She's a senior in high school and she has never been to school before. Like she's never been to public school. She's always been homeschooled, and she convinced her mom to let her go to school for her senior year before she goes to college. And she meets Dean Holder, our main character. I would definitely read trigger warnings for this book before you go into it, because there are a lot of like things that could be very triggering. I did not see it being this heavy of a book in some circumstances. It was not heavy in the way it ends with us is heavy, where you're kind of actively in it. This book was just so heartbreakingly beautiful. And once you get to know Dean, like at first I was a little bit like, this guy is not it. But then once you actually get to know him, I was like, oh, Dean. And then of course, going in order, I read Losing Hope. Well, I don't think this is actually in order. I think you have to read Finding Cinderella and then Losing Hope, but I just read these back to back. This is basically just Dean's point of view. And so I really loved this book. I felt like you got to know Dean a lot more. I also gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. At first I was like, reading the same book just in a different POV, like why couldn't we have just had his POV in the first book? But then once you actually read this book, you realize how impactful just his book is, because there are things in Hopeless that you learn about Dean, and you kind of get more of his backstory and his, you know, just roots, it was really heartbreaking and beautiful and sad and amazing to read. The only thing were just in some points of the book, it was his point of view on some of these same exact situations that happened in Hopeless, and I just really didn't want to read that. Like I just really honestly didn't care, because I felt like in Hopeless, the way that his actions were described, it felt like you already knew what he was thinking. Like I didn't really need to know his exact thoughts, especially since when I read this and then went back and read Hopeless, I was like, okay, so he's literally just saying why it was just like explaining his actions that we already knew, sis. Like we already knew he felt that way. And the next book that I read was Finding Cinderella. This is a novella to go with the Hopeless series. In this book, you're following Six and Daniel, which are Dean and Sky's best friends. So you kind of read about it a little bit in Losing Hope, and then you kind of get it in the novella for this. The plot twist in this book was very unexpected for me. I was like, are you kidding me? It just tied up a lot of loose ends, I felt like, from the Hopeless universe. And it was just kind of too cheesy for me at some points, and it was just like not nearly as impactful as the other stories, but I don't think it was supposed to. This was literally just kind of tie up loose ends and connect the stories. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars though. I still did enjoy this, and it ties into our next book, which is All Your Perfects. But I'm not going to talk about how it ties in, but it does tie in. So if you guys are wanting to read it, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to read it Hopeless, I read it Hopeless, Losing Hope, Finding Cinderella, and that's how it worked for me. And then they say to read all Your Perfects, and then there's, I think it's called Finding Perfects is a novella. I didn't read it, but I did look up what was talked about in that, because after I got done reading this, I could kind of assume. So then, yeah. But anyway, this may disappoint a lot of you guys. I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which low-key angered me a lot, actually, because people talk about how absolutely beautiful this story is, how they cried, how they loved it, and I just did not feel the same. I honestly was like, I don't really like the couple in this book. They should definitely break up. Like, I was just kind of like not rooting for them, which is definitely not something you should feel when you are reading two characters that you should be rooting for. We're down to our last two. So number 10 this month was Heartburnd by Colleen Hoover. I rated this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that this would just be like a cute little summer read. I know a lot of people were reading this in the summertime. I think if I would have brought this book on vacation with me when we went to, where did we go? We were like in Seaside basically this summer, and if I would have taken this with me, like I was picturing, it doesn't take place in Seaside, it takes place in Texas, but I was picturing like Seaside, Florida, the way that they were kind of describing their area around them. It felt like how Seaside is. I thought Samson was like so thoughtful and sweet in a very realistic way, because sometimes, unfortunately, I feel like the book boyfriends are like, that would never happen in real life, like I said, unfortunately. But he was kind of sweet in a really realistic way that you could kind of find a lot of places in guys, and it was just really endearing to me. And I loved Bea's character. Like, I loved her. She was just amazing. TJ is like a dog that she finds in this book, and I don't know why dogs and books just get to me. It gets to me, and I loved it. It had good vibes, and I liked their connection in the book. The only thing that I would say, like, to make this book a 4 out of 5, it just wasn't super memorable. Like I said, this book was just like a fun little read, but I don't think I'll like remember this book and absolutely love it for years to come. And the very last book of this month was Without Merit. I don't see a lot of people talk about this book at all. Like, at all. This is definitely one of her more or less talked about books, and I rated this book a 2.75 stars. This was not a great way to end off my month, but after this book, I swear I was like done and clocked out. You're basically just following Mara and her crappy family. So the family dynamic was interesting to me. I was like, okay, this was kind of interesting because I feel like it's a little out of character for a Colleen Hoover book, but I genuinely, this is the second worst book I've ever read from her. The worst book that I ever read was Too Late. No one talks about that book, and they shouldn't, because that book literally felt like a 15-year-old who reads books on Wattpad and then thinks that they can write a book themselves. The storyline though kept me reading, because there were things that were talked about, things that were hinted at, and I was like, I need to know what happens in this story. There was absolutely zero connection for the romance that they had in this book. No connection whatsoever. I was like, how is there even a romance? They don't even speak really for like majority of the book, because Merritt decides to like just not communicate with anybody about her feelings and blame her problems on everyone. Those are all 11 books I read in November. When you're watching this, it is December 2nd. I am trying to pre-film videos for vlogmas. I cannot promise you guys that I will upload every day. I do have a job, and I also just am trying to balance everything in my life. So with that being said, if you guys liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below. And if you guys liked me, go ahead and feel free to hit that subscribe button down below and the notification bell at this side to be notified whenever I upload videos. As always, comment down below anything that you want. If you guys have read any of these books, your opinions on them, any videos that you guys want to see, or just really anything that you feel like commenting today. That was it for today's video. I will see you guys when I see ya. Peace.